In this video, you'll learn how to create a family starting with the correct template. You will then see the correct process of developing a family, which includes adding reference planes, creating dimensions, and then labeling the dimensions with parameters. To create a new family, under Families, click New. And then open the appropriate folder, and you can see all of the templates. Some categories have a specific family template, whereas some do not. If you do not see a template specific to the category of family you want to create, you can use one of the generic model templates. As you can see, there are several options available: generic model, adaptive, ceiling-based, face-based, floor-based, line-based, so on and so forth. You can always change the category after you create the family. For example, select the generic model template and then click Open, and Revit will create a generic model family, but then you can change the category. On the Create tab in the Properties panel, click Family Category and Parameters, and then you can change the category. For this example, I'll select Furniture, and then that'll change the family to the Furniture category. And now any visibility controls that are specific to that category or a schedule created of the Furniture category will then apply to this family. I'll click OK to close the dialog, and now we can look at creating reference planes. As you can see, there are already 2 reference planes, and if you can't select them, you want to pay attention to your Select Pinned Elements selection setting. So when that is disabled, you won't be able to select any pinned reference planes. So you'll need to enable it, and then you'll be able to select any pinned reference planes. When you select a reference plane, you can see its instance properties in the Properties palette. And be aware that reference planes can have a name, so you can name them, that way you can keep track of them. And then you can also dimension to reference planes when the family's loaded into a project, and the name will appear in the tooltip. Additionally, you can control the Is Reference setting, and when I expand that drop-down, you can see there are several options here. And most of them behave as a strong reference. So strong reference is one of the options. That's also what the left, center, right, front, it's basically the same setting. If you select one of the specific ones, then it'll simply just show you that in the tooltip, but those will have the highest priority when you are dimensioning to them in a project. The weak reference, that'll have a not as high of a priority when you're dimensioning to those reference planes. And then if it is not a reference, then you will not be able to dimension to that reference plane when the family's loaded into the project. I'll leave these settings as they are. And then lastly, be aware of the Defines Origin setting. You can have that selected for 1 vertical and 1 horizontal reference plane, and then the intersection of those 2 will be the origin of the family. So in this case, both of the center left, right, and then the center front back are both set to define the origin. So therefore, that intersection point will be the origin of the family or the insertion point when you are placing that family. To create new reference planes, on the Create tab in the Datum panel, click Reference Plane, and then you can simply click 2 points to place the start and end points of a reference plane. So I'm going to place a left and a right, and then a front and a back. And then I'll click Modify to end the command. And once again, afterwards, I can select it and I can add a name, adjust the reference, so on and so forth. Also, you can create a new subcategory, and then you can control the line color or line pattern of those. So for example, change the name to exterior and click OK. Then I can change that to, let's just say green, and click OK. And then I'll click OK. And now we can change the subcategory for any of the reference planes to update the graphics of those. That way, if you have several reference planes in a family, you can use subcategories to help distinguish them in the project. All right, let's go ahead and adjust the subcategory for those as well. And now we'll add dimensions. On the Modify tab in the Measure panel, you can click Aligned Dimension, and then I will place a dimension for the vertical reference planes, and then click the EQ toggle to toggle on an equality constraint. And then I'll place an overall dimension. And then I'll do the same thing for the horizontal reference planes. And then I'll click Modify in the command. At this point, we have equality constraints so that the left and right reference planes are always equidistant from the center, which is our origin. And then same thing with these front and back reference planes. Next, I will go to the Create tab and click Family Types. And you'll notice that that is also available on the Modify tab. That same Properties panel is available. And Family Types will open the Family Types dialog. And now we can create new parameters. At the bottom, click New Parameter, and I will create a parameter called Length. And the discipline will be Common, and the type of parameter is Length, and I'll group it under Dimensions, and then click OK. And I'll create one more, and we'll call it Width, and leave it set to the same. But be aware that the type of parameter that is going to control the behavior of that parameter. For example, if we leave it set to length, then we can assign it to a dimension. If we select material, then we can assign it to the material parameter of a form, a geometric form, and that would allow us to control the material of that specific element. So you just need to be aware of what you're creating that parameter for and how you want it to behave. Once again, I'll select length and then click OK. And now we have a length, width, and height parameter. We can move those up and down as needed. And I'll leave them set to 0 for now and click OK. And then I'll select the overall length dimension here. And then in the label drop down in the contextual ribbon tab, I'll select length. And now the length parameter updates to that dimension value. I'll change this one to width. And if I go back to the Family Types dialog, you can see those dimensions are updated, and I can even change those. So for example, if I change them to 4 feet and click OK, now you can see those values update. So now what we can do is we can create the geometry, and then we can constrain the geometry to the reference planes. And then when we update those parameter values, it will update the geometry as well.